In today's economy, you need two jobs just to afford breakfast. Filling up your tank? Might as well finance it. But there's some good news. Northwest Insurance Agency can actually save you some money. Auto, home, business, and more custom coverage without the custom price tag. Northwest Insurance. Protect more. Spend less.
This is the On the Pony Express podcast, part of the On3 network. Check out all the SMU coverage you need at ontheponyexpress.com. Now, here's your host, Billy Embody. 1, 2, 3, let me go.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. I'm Billy Embody. Happy Friday, one of 2 Fridays remaining before SMU football will be back out on the practice field. We got this week, we got next week, and then come August 1st, the Mustangs will be back out there in fall camp. So the countdown is on. So I hope you guys are having the best summer weekend you could possibly have wherever you're listening and whenever you're listening to us on this edition of the podcast, having some fun out there in what is now a hot Dallas heat that has hit us all. And so hope you guys get to barbecue and enjoy the pool or be out on the water or something. But we are breaking down SMU position by position for you guys, kind of highlight a couple position battles, talk about them, and also hit on my picks for star players off of this year's SMU Mustangs as we get ready for ACC Media Days on Tuesday. Again, I got to remember, it's not Monday, it's Tuesday. That 5 a.m. flight out of DFW for Dean Rolski and myself is going to hit pretty hard on Tuesday. So we'll have your coverage there. We just got a Clemson player confirmed for their day at Media Days. All of the Stanford players that are coming are going to join us. So we're starting to stack up some players that will be stopping by the On the Pony Express spot on Radio Row in Charlotte. Also, check out ontheponyexpress.com for just $1 for your first week. If you live in Charlotte, we'll be there Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We leave Thursday night real late, but Wednesday night looking to get together with some of our subscribers potentially as well. And we will be able to catch up with you guys and do something. And we always like visiting with our subscribers. So more information on that on the message board, so make sure you check it out at ontheponyexpress.com. We're presented by our friends at Northwest Insurance Agency. Call Mark Villasana, a proud SMU alum, and talk over your current coverage rates and more with him, and he can get you the right advice on the insurance front and give you his own thoughts on what your policy should be, whether it be personal, home, business, all those things. 214-352-5656 is where you can get more information from our friend at nwagencies.com. Mark Villasana, Northwest Insurance Agency. All right, of course, the headline position for SMU's offense is the quarterback position. Kevin Jennings, one of the best quarterbacks in the country. And look, a quarterback who enters 2025 probably coming off a really, I would say, just season that puts him in a different stratosphere than what SMU is probably used to. Truthfully, even with Shane Buechele at the helm, that was in the AAC. This is a ACC quarterback who started 11 games and was able to lead SMU to the conference championship game and also the college football playoff. He threw for over 3,200 yards, which ranked 4th in the league, 23 passing touchdowns, which is good for 5th, 171.5 passer efficiency rating, highest in the ACC, 9-2 as a starter, added 354 yards on the ground and 5 rushing touchdowns. But look, also turned the ball over a lot. No question about that. In particular, those games against Duke, and honestly, because of that game against Duke, I mean, his numbers in terms of fumbles, I think he ended up with one more fumble than Cam Ward on the season. Now, obviously, Kevin didn't start as many games as Cam Ward did over the course of the year, but Cam Ward had some fumbles that were, incredibly poorly timed throughout his season. But then interceptions, he was, just poor in the Penn State game in terms of timing, had some bad ones at Duke as well, and just, needs to take care of the ball more. So those big moments in big games, as far as the turnovers go, are probably going to cloud the way people should view Kevin Jennings, in particular that college football playoff game. I mean, that for so many national media is, I would say, carrying how they feel about Kevin Jennings. And at the same time, you had Nico Iamaleava, who, Tennessee scored 3 points in their college football playoff game. I think they had maybe 50 yards of offense or something at halftime of that one, and just were, run out of the building, and probably doesn't get enough grief as he should, regardless of what his number was and whether or not it was met ultimately when he entered the transfer portal. We all know, and we mentioned it in early December, if you were listening to Walking Strong, long before it became a national conversation this summer, when I mentioned it on Twitter around Kevin Jennings. And we know that Alabama was coming after him. They were trying to get him to enter the transfer portal. And there were other programs that certainly would have loved Kevin Jennings to leave SMU. And look, and trying to get somebody to enter the transfer portal isn't necessarily a reflection of where somebody should be ranked, the accolades they receive, all of that. I mean, look at Darian Mensah at Tulane, leaving for Duke, getting a massive salary to go play for the Blue Devils. And because of that, in my opinion, he's getting a lot more buzz than Kevin Jennings is nationally. And while they're both being tossed around as, two of the best quarterbacks in the ACC, so you've got to look at it from that lens too. I mean, most people aren't saying Darian Mensah's at the top or near, right near the top of the ACC, and then they have Kevin Jennings way down. They're still being talked about among the best quarterbacks in the ACC. And that puts SMU in prime position to have this star quarterback. And if Kevin Jennings plays the type of season that he did last year, SMU is going to have a really good shot to be in the ACC championship game again. Regardless of what happened in the first half against Clemson and then on the road at Penn State, SMU had a quarterback that was incredibly dynamic, playmaker, one of the most fun players to watch in college football at the quarterback position, because every single game you never knew what highlight reel play or what big play Kevin Jennings was going to come up with. Some of those scramble drills against Stanford, against UVA. He had obviously a big game against Pitt. He hit, Matthew Hibner on the 80-yarder on a fun little pop play. There's so many moments, the big long run against Louisville. I mean, there's so many moments that put him on the map, but instead of becoming a blip like last year for a lot of people, he enters this season with a chance to be a major focal point on the radar for people. As Kevin Jennings enters this season, he's somebody that is going to have all of the attention on him. He's going to be facing a schedule that every defensive coordinator he faces and every team he faces is going to have had an entire summer to game plan around what they think this year they can do to Kevin Jennings. And look, the key is obviously getting pressure. Duke was able to do that. Duke was able to really find ways to disrupt Kevin Jennings. Clemson for the first half really pinned their ears back and got after him, and that impacted him. Penn State, you can make the argument that Kevin really, had his own way of impacting his game and how things went there, of course. But when you look at Kevin as far as stardom, he is the obvious pick at quarterback, at the quarterback position for SMU. And there's no position battle this offseason. There's a battle of sorts of who's going to be the backup quarterback and when, I think I would add to that, because Tyler Van Dyke is somebody that is still recovering from injury or hoping to be, full go. But Kevin Jennings is the obvious pick, to be the star at the quarterback position for SMU. There's no getting around that. And if he If you think he stays the same and he's the same player, SMU is going to be pretty good on offense. If you think he regresses, I mean, there's always that chance. There's a chance that defensive coordinators are going to be able to scout him, plan for him all offseason, know he's the guy, and really dive into what SMU likes to do with Kevin Jennings at the quarterback position. And maybe against a Baylor, against a TCU, against a Louisville, Miami, Clemson, they're able to capitalize and SMU doesn't look as good offensively. There's a world. But I think any quarterback going into year 2 of being the full-time starter is going to have a better feel for things, especially when they know that they're going into fall camp as a starter. The biggest question is, will SMU find a running game that is going to be able to complement Kevin Jennings at the quarterback position? That's something that really helped him last season. I mean, you look at SMU under Rhett Lashley, if they get to 30 points, I think they've lost maybe 1 or 2 games. If they run the ball 30 plus times, that is a good indicator things are going well and they're going to find a way to win. It's basically get to 30, 35 carries and get to 30 points and they're going to win the football game. I mean, that is the recipe for success. And we talked so much about that last season, early in the year, when Preston Stone was at quarterback, when Kevin Jennings was at quarterback. I mean, look at the games they played their best. And I'm talking about really played their best. I mean, obviously you could throw Houston Christian out, but Nevada, they ran the ball only 34 times. You look at BYU, only 36 times. TCU, then they jump up, get above 40, go to 42. Florida State, 51. Louisville was a really interesting game and a hard-fought one. They ran the ball 35 times, average 5.4 yards per carry. Stanford, maybe a step back, 38 carries. Duke, 50 times. And if you look SMU in that ball game, if not for turnovers, and I know that's a big qualifier, they blow the doors off of Duke. I mean, you talk about not being able to get in from the one. You talk about where they turn the ball over in certain situations with Kevin Jennings, just tough. And then 36 against Pitt. BC, one of their tougher games on that ACC slate. They only got to 30. UVA, they didn't play that well in a sense. 35 carries. Cal, 30. That was a weird game overall. I think the entire fourth quarter was backups. And so they were certainly milking the clock. Clemson, 35, Penn State, 36, but they were unable to really run the ball much at all against that front. And they were, of course, playing from behind much of that game. So I still think this is a quarterback that will be able to get better. And having Jordan Hudson, having Romello Brinson, finding somebody like a Ymir Knight in the transfer portal, finding somebody like a Dylan Goffney that Kevin trusts, the big question mark is going to be that run game. And if that run game can find a hot hand each week, and maybe even somebody who develops into the guy, then they're going to be very, very good on offense. I just don't see Kevin Jennings with the whole offseason of knowing what the ACC is, knowing this offense, having the experience, adding the weight that he has to his frame. I just don't see him taking a step back. In season openers, that is something that SMU has under Rhett Lashley not necessarily looked the greatest in. From my recollection, at least, they had to come back against Nevada. They usually take a minute in certain games to kind of get going again. And that's why it's so important that, they get East Texas A&M at least before that Baylor game. And this is a program that usually gets better over the course of the season. And I do think that's important. Like they always kind of have to find certain things and then they usually get rolling. That's why SMU's been so good in November over the course of Rhett Lashley's tenure. So I'm interested to see if for the first time you really have a quarterback coming back that, I mean, if you really think about it over the course of a season, Rhett takes over and they have Tanner Mordecai and they're able to, get to a bowl game in his first year. In his second year, they have Preston Stone and this is, that next step. And Preston's able to lead them to an AAC championship game. And they got better as the season went along. that win against Memphis and things like that. And you look at last year, they changed. They had all that change in non-conference, and they got better as the season went along, really peaking at that, I would say, that Pitt game. And then they, were in complete control the rest of those games outside of BC, truthfully. So I think this year having Kevin back is something that it maybe isn't being talked about enough. And him being the guy will give him a chance to really, shine early on this season. You look at the running back position for SMU, and this is where it gets difficult. And man, when you talk about trying to pick a star player out of this group, I probably have to go with Derek McFall, just because he's shown some of the things that SMU wanted out of Brashard Smith last year and got. Whereas Chris Johnson Jr. seems like straight line, super, super fast. Jermico Green Chunky is a freshman, so that's important. TJ Harden is a bigger back. Think of a more accomplished LJ Johnson, at least at the collegiate level. And Derek McFall just seems like he's got the most opportunity to potentially stay on the field all 3 downs. And if he is that dude for SMU, then he's going to be the star. If he's not, and this is kind of projecting and not necessarily based on anything I've heard or anything, but if Derek McFall isn't the dude, I think SMU is going to be running back by committee, unless TJ Harden comes in and just wows, or Jermico Green comes in and just wows immediately. So that's a position where, in terms of preseason, I'm looking at Derek McFall and picking him as my star player. I think he's explosive. I think he does all of the things that SMU needs out of the running back position. But the question is, this is still the most important position battle on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, this is by far the most important position. And if SMU gets 1 or 2 of these players to be that impressive for them, they're going to have a chance to really go far and certainly make waves over the course of this season with its offense and what they're able to do and all of those things. So I'm really watching this position closely. I think when you look at the position battles for this group, I would say the one thing is, do they decide this position battle in fall camp and obviously try to go with somebody and get them going in time for that Baylor game, so that it's not as much a trial and error. You're not going to learn that much against East Texas A&M, which is not a problem, but an obstacle for SMU to overcome. Kyle Cooper, Tyler Foster, in terms of, okay, who do we like? Who do we want to give the bulk of the carries? I'm sure that they would probably lean towards Derek McFall and Chris Johnson Jr. because they're the guys that were here in the spring. They're the guys that, in Derek McFall's case, were here last season as well. So there's a lot of that in particular that is important when talking about that position is trust. And those top 2 are the ones that are going to be trusted the most early on. And unless TJ Harden comes in and really, really steps up in a big way and really makes a name for himself, so much so that they can't take him off the field, that is how I see it playing out. And the good thing is they do have options, and I do like that they only have 4. Obviously everybody's got to stay healthy, and that every position could say that. But when you look at this group, making sure that you don't overthink it, I think, is what SMU did a good job of last year. They saw immediately what Brashard could bring, and they went with it. They didn't try to appease this player or that player. And, you could argue that, LJ Johnson might still be here if they tried to appease him a little bit more. And I'm not saying that from the standpoint of LJ was unhappy. He stayed with the program through the spring, or was here in the spring semester. Like that's a player who wanted to be here and wouldn't have stayed in the spring if he had a bad experience in the fall. But they went with a decision, and it paid off in a huge way with Brashard Smith. I think it's a position that they should try that again. They should go that direction again. Go with Derek McFall or Chris Johnson Jr. or TJ Harden or whoever you like the most out of fall camp. Go with them and see if you can catch that fire early. And that way, when you face Baylor week 2, you're in a position where you have somebody who got a lot of live reps the first week, even if it's against East Texas A&M, and they've been accustomed to it a little bit, and they're going to be able to, make make that move and kind of go for it in that sense. So that's the running back position. I think everybody in that room brings something different to the table, which is kind of fun. And it's something that, they'll certainly, try to work out, I think, before the season and kind of say, okay, we're going to go with this player and see where he gets us based on how they play and practice in fall camp. So they've got some good options. I am of the belief that they need to go with one player. I think that's where you've seen SMU have the most success, whether it was Rhett Lashlee, the OC, or Rhett Lashlee, the head coach, is when they went with one. And obviously they have to be a good option too. But I think going with one and saying, okay, you see how it goes against Baylor. If that person that you believe is going to be hot is hot against Baylor, great. If you get a half in, then you can maybe. You got a veteran like TJ Harden. Maybe you go that route. You got CJ Johnson, maybe you go that route. But I think going with a little bit of a, pick the guy and roll with it approach is probably the move at the running back position. I think it gives them the best chance to be ready for Baylor and what is going to be a good Baylor team week 2 is getting one of them the most reps. And that has to be largely based on their performance in fall camp. And then they like what they see at East Texas A&M. So, man, if I'm SMU, this is just kind of a funny or maybe not funny at all aside. If I'm SMU, I'm trying to roll into that East Texas A&M game and probably run the ball like 60 times and just get those reps. Maybe you can get 15, 15, 15 and see how you feel after that about those 4. So that way they really have some live bullets flying at them, some live tackling, and you can get a really good feel for it. If Kevin Jennings throws those 10 passes in that game, awesome. You move on. So that is one position battle I really wanted to highlight on the offensive side of the ball. I get to the wide receiver position, and you can obviously pick an outside star and you can pick a slot star, but I'm just going to pick one. I'm going to roll with Jordan Hudson again. I think his body type, his physicality, I don't know if it'll break through and you'll see 1,000+ yard Jordan Hudson, just because SMU has RJ Maryland, Matthew Hebner, Romello Brinson, Ymir Knight, Dylan Goffney, Link Rhodes. They like Isaiah Robertson, Dalen Singleton, Jalen Cooper. I mean, they got so many options in the passing game and they do rotate. But I think this is the year that Jordan Hudson versus TCU, Jordan Hudson in some of those games where he stepped up in a big way. This is something that I think they can really, get more out of Jordan Hudson when they need him to. And he's one hell of a blocker too. I mean, a lot of these receivers that they have, and I know they lost, Moochie, and they lost Keyshawn Smith and Roderick Daniels and Jake Bailey. All of these receivers coming back appear to be willing and able blockers as well, which shouldn't be lost on anyone. Anyone that watched SMU last year, you're wondering, all right, where's the big time receiver? But man, those guys make big time plays away from themselves when they're not getting the ball. Like, blocking is so important in this offense. The extra effort, it's such a part of the culture that's, been pushed and has been clearly bought into with this group. So they've got to keep that going. But Jordan Hudson's certainly one of the best blockers on the team from the skill positions. And that's also in part why I picked him as my star player. And then tight end, man, this is a tough one, but I got to go with RJ Maryland. I think he's somebody that if he is, back to his old self early in the season, he's going to be one of the best tight ends in the country. And what I'm really excited about RJ Maryland with is I think they move him around a lot more this year. And I don't know what that means for him, but so much I think of what RJ Maryland can be is based on his matchups and how he also helps SMU create matchups for others. If you split RJ Maryland out wide and you have Jordan Hudson in the slot, you're going to have a big physical receiver who's got some speed matched up on a safety or matched up on maybe a linebacker if you can really scheme it up, or they're going to be matched up against maybe a nickel. but, nickel might be more Ymir Knight or somebody else. There's so many different things that Rhett Lashley and his staff, I'm sure, are going to try to do with RJ Maryland this year that will make him that much more intriguing and potentially that much more of a problem. But at worst, he's going to take so much attention because teams are very aware of him when it comes to what he can do at the tight end position as a whole. So really high on RJ Maryland and Matthew Hibner as a whole, and Stone EB and what they bring. So you're in great shape with those three at tight end for SMU. The offensive line, I'm just going to go with 1 star, and it's PJ Williams. I've said this before. I'll say it again. I think he's one of the most underrated linemen in the entire country. My opinion is I think he should be a preseason, like, 3rd-team All-American. What I saw in the spring, and I know there are other really good linemen out there, but what I saw in the spring, rep after rep against different defensive ends, you have somebody who is just playing on another level, and I'm excited to see what he brings to the table when it comes to his fall camp and what he put together this summer. I just think and I was talking about this on a radio station last week, what he's done to not only change himself as a football player, but as a person is just so cool. I mean, that's why that's why you come to SMU and you hear so many good success stories from the transfer portal. PJ Williams is one of them. I mean, he just has done it all. He's been able to be such a staple of consistency on that offensive line, mainly at right tackle, and he's going to be so important to this team and their success as they get into conference play and they face they go on the road to Clemson and they face some of these defensive ends that are among the best in the country. PJ Williams is going to be very, very important. So PJ Williams is my pick as a star player. Before we go any further, I do want to remind you guys about our friends at StatusJet, statusjet.com. Reach out to David Henry and his team today. Mention On the Pony Express or that you listen to the podcast and get your round trip discount from StatusJet. Go to statusjet.com for more. Plan out your unforgettable football season trip with our friends at StatusJet. And again, if you want to write it off for work, there's no better time than to do that now in the world of private jet charter companies. So we appreciate our friends at StatusJet for all they do for us at the On the Pony Express podcast. Moving over to the defensive side of the ball, this is one where there's so much change on this defense. There's so many intriguing storylines on the defensive line in particular, which makes it really difficult to pick all this out. But I go to defensive end, and I'm probably going to go I'm going with Isaiah Smith, and I'm a big Isaiah Smith fan, have been since he arrived at SMU from the DMV. But Turbo's back for his final season of football, and I'm going to pick him as a star player. Billy Walton had a really good spring. Cam Robertson's on that edge spot, kind of wherever they can move him. But I think this is the year that Turbo is finally unleashed. This is his money year. He doesn't have to compete with the Jafari Harvey who's in his last year. And just the way he's been able to impact games when he is let go has been a lot of fun to watch. So I'm going to go with Isaiah Smith. We're big Turbo fans here. DJ Warner's going to have his time. Ja'Kai Lang, Billy Walton, they're all, younger guys on this defense, but they're also very versatile and impressive players that, for, guys like a DJ Warner, I think is going to be really, really good one day just with his elite speed. But Isaiah Smith is a veteran, and he's changed his number from 58 to number 1, and he's got to play like a number 1 pass rusher this season for SMU. So very high on Turbo and what he's going to bring to the table at defensive end. You look at the defensive tackle position, it's much more difficult to try and pinpoint this because you have Jeffrey Mbe, you have Terry Webb that they brought in, that they were here for the spring. They lost Jonathan Jefferson. He's probably the pick if he's not hurt. DeMarge Lewis didn't practice in the spring. He's recovering from his injury. And then they add Kevontae Spears and Wu Spencer from the transfer portal this offseason after the spring. And that makes the unknown just really interesting. But I had to pick between Jeffrey Embody and Terry Webb, and I'm going to go with Terry Webb. And no, he's not the power conference transfer. He's not the former number one JUCO defensive lineman like Jeffrey Embody. He's not 6'6", 6'7", 300 pounds. He's on that, kind of shorter side. I bet he's like 6'2", 315. But man, he moves so well. I mean, he had some reps in the spring that really make you think he's going to be like somebody who could end up being an NFL draft pick. And I've talked with so many people about him, and they continue to be impressed with his athleticism. And if you think about the guys that ended up being so good for SMU that transferred in, they got to check the athletic box. And I think Terry Webb's going to do that. And just what he's able to do this season is probably the most important storyline of the fall for SMU on defense. If Terry Webb hits, obviously Jeffrey Embody too, but if Terry Webb hits, then you're looking at a pretty formidable starting defensive line. And you feel really good about where things are trending in that regard. So I look at him as being the star of this defensive tackle position. And it's going to be really interesting to see what he does this season. And I'll be intrigued to see if there's any adjustment for him. Do want to remind you guys as well about our friends at AKM Turf and Greens. Get $500 off by mentioning on theponyexpress.com when you look at them for your revamped backyard. Whether you want to have a putting green, chipping green, whether you want to do pavers, they can do it all. They can roll out some gravel as well to take up some poor areas of your yard and make it look really clean and put together. Reach out to them today, akmturfandgreens.com. Get $500 off your project today when you mention on theponyexpress.com. Now, linebacker is a position where I feel really strongly about my star prediction, although I think both starting linebackers are going to be real solid and key for SMU. But got to go with Alexander Kilgore, a player that they're bringing with them to ACC Media Days. He's going to be one of the top linebackers in the ACC now that he's getting his full opportunity to start for this defense. It's, what's the meme? It's about damn time. Yeah, it's about damn time for Alexander Kilgore. We've been big fans of him ever since he was coming out of Katy Paytow. So this is a really cool year for him, I'm sure, to get this opportunity. And I'm going to try to get that out of him at ACC Media Days and just kind of talk about, this journey to get here, because it has been a journey and a time of waiting for him. But man, athletically checks the boxes, has the right mentality, has learned probably a bunch from Ahmad Walker and Kobe Wilson and all of those guys that have been ahead of him, the veterans and things like that. And he's my, kind of no-brainer star pick here for the linebacker position. And look, I'll mention this. I mean, it's a position that, Zakai Barker's right there next to him, I feel like. But they're also going to have a chance to play guys like Brandon Maizono and Justin Medlock and Kyle Firm and maybe a little bit of Brandon Booker. They're going to play a bunch of guys and kind of see where, what shakes out. I think Akeel Washington could even play a little bit of linebacker, the South Alabama transfer, just in spots. But Alexander Kilgore, if SMU is going to be as good as they were down the middle last year, he has to be the star. I think he's going to be the star. The corner position is going to be a lot of there's going to be, I think, maybe a little bit of skepticism, maybe a lot of skepticism around this group, just because, if there was a weakness of this defense, it was, pass defense. But when you stop the run and teams are down as much as they were to SMU in conference play, Florida State, you look at the TCU game. I mean, Josh Hoover had a bunch of yards, but they also forced turnovers and did all of those things. And, there were a lot of opportunities for opponents to get some cheap passing yards on SMU because they stopped the run so well. They got up big. Opponents had to pass the ball. And so there's that caveat, but also it was leaky at times. Deuce Harmon wasn't maybe who I think they were hoping for, like a plug and play standout at corner. And you had to move Brandon Crosley out there to corner. You had Jalen Davis Robinson. But really, other than that, it was kind of a tough tough group, at times. My pick for a star player is going to be Marcellus Barnes. And the reason why is I just hear so much about just how talented he is. And Fran Brown, getting him at Syracuse, told me a lot about what Fran Brown thinks of him. Everybody thinks Fran Brown is one of the best defensive backs coaches in college football. Obviously, he's the head coach of Syracuse, but defensive backs coach by trade. And I don't know. I just have a lot of trust in him. Despite him being banged up as a freshman at Syracuse, I think he's going to step into this role and surprise. And at the same time, this is a position of competition. Deuce Harmon has to be one of the better players on this defense. You've got to have Marcellus Barnes out there because of what you've invested in him. And you need Jalen Davis Robinson to be consistently good this season as well. But then you also have Speedy Nettles who could emerge, and maybe a Zay Gentry steps up a little bit. But those top three of sorts, Deuce Harmon, Jalen Davis Robinson, Marcellus Barnes, those are the ones you're going to see the most of. I'm going to roll with Marcellus Barnes as my star pick. At safety, man, I think this is the only position I'm going to go co-stars. And this is such a cop-out, but Ahmad Moses and Isaiah Wakobi are that level of good. And they both do different things out there so well. And they're both so selfless that if they're watching, which, I don't know, but if they're watching, I think they wouldn't care. Maybe. I mean, they definitely don't care what I think, but I would say it's very on brand that I've got to go co-star with them because, man, they're just like the Bash Brothers back there or whatever type of, comparison you want to make to key contributors or what have you. They're just so good. And the fact that they're back together and both of them, I'm sure, got opportunities to go elsewhere. And I know Ahmad did in particular, but these guys are the epitome of what you want from a mindset, from a leadership, from a playmaking, from a consistency. I mean, they just work and they really set the tone for this entire defense. So they're my stars. And then the big position battle, I would say, out of this group, because if you look at the defensive line, they always rotate. But man, you need a Lamadrick Spencer, a Kyron Chambers, or Jaden Milner-Jones to really step up at that nickel spot. And if they do that, then that's going to be big for SMU. And Tyron Polley could factor in as a first guy off the bench type of safety as well, in my opinion, at least. So I don't know who's going to win out at that nickel spot. Kyron Chambers worked a lot there in the spring. Lamadrick Spencer was getting acclimated. Jaden Milner-Jones pretty much missed all of spring, I think, from an injury perspective. But, Kyron Chambers has really come on and he's put in the work. He's probably one of the guys that I've seen out there just working his tail off after practice a bunch. And, he's just really matured, I think, since he got here and has bought in and really been able to, find a way to factor in here and not be written off and not be recruited over and all of that. So my co-stars are Ahmad Moses and Isaiah Wakobi back there at safety, but the big position battle for me is what happens at nickel. And I think one of those guys should be serviceable enough, but we're going to find out pretty quickly. And people will realize CJ Sanders was so good that it's not an easy one to replace. So we'll be watching that position closely in fall camp. So kind of ran down the stars and the position battles, or a couple of them. I'll highlight some other position battles at ontheponyexpress.com. But before we go, do want to remind you guys about our friends at the Thomas Auto Group. Head up 75 to McKinney and visit any of their 4 dealerships and mention On the Pony Express and get employee pricing on new and pre-owned vehicles today.
At Thomas Auto Group, the Thomas Promise includes the low price promise,
the pre-owned promise,
and the 72-hour exchange promise.
And finally, the 100% customer satisfaction promise. So shop Thomas Auto Group today, home of the Thomas Promise.
That's right. And I promise you guys are going to like all of our coverage from Charlotte for ACC Media Day starting on Tuesday. And we will be there to deliver it all to you guys and really hope you guys enjoy it. So make sure you subscribe to the website, support us, just $1 for your first week, and we will have you guys covered and carry you guys through next week from Charlotte. So Hope you guys enjoyed this edition of the podcast. Have a great weekend. Have some fun. And we'll catch you next week from Charlotte as the Mustangs head there as a huge focal point for media rather than just the newbies like they did last year. So hope you guys tune in next week, and we'll catch you next time on another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast.
Thanks for listening to the On the Pony Express podcast with Billy Embody. Follow us on your socials on X at SMU on 3 and on Instagram at on3SMU. And keep it locked to ontheponyexpress.com for more coverage.